we need AI. But what you really have to think about is even before the tech piece is what's the problem I'm trying to solve? Because if you don't have a problem to solve, then you're going to just frustrate people.
Welcome to the Business of AI in Healthcare podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Bob Kaiser. Our mission is to discuss practical insights and share knowledge on how to navigate the transformative technology of AI. It's important to understand how AI can be used safely and ethically while revolutionizing patient care, streamlining operations, and enhancing medical research. Today, we welcome Dr. Heather Bassett, Chief Medical Officer of Xsolis, an AI-driven healthcare technology company that serves hundreds of hospitals, health systems, and health plans nationwide. Welcome to the podcast, Heather.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm excited to be here and I'm looking forward to some really good conversation.
I'm so glad to finally reconnect with Xsolis. Believe it or not, I interviewed your co-founder and CEO, Joan Butters, in 2018. That was 7 years ago. I was hosting the Business of Healthcare podcast for the University of Texas, Dallas. And your topic then was how cognitive computing can break down silos between healthcare providers and payers.
Yeah.
Now,
We've changed quite a bit since then.
I know. And the words back then, the words AI and machine learning, they were used in the interview and they were discussed, but they just weren't understood by many people then. But now, Xsolis has been transformed into a preeminent AI company. And you guys leverage machine learning, data science, and you're still breaking down the silos. Tell us how the culture of Xsolis changed, become so AI-centric. What happened?
Yeah, I think you'd mentioned Joan Butters in the conversation you had previously. We like to joke that we started in AI before AI became sexy. And so I think we were able to ingrain that culture very early. We recognized once we came live with a couple of hospitals and we started accumulating data, we recognized that we could improve our analytics through AI. And so we hired a data scientist and started basically in a sandbox at that point in time, fairly quickly created our first machine learning predictive model, layered that into our workflow, and we're very successful with it, and then just continued to roll out further AI, either initiatives or products. And you spoke about culture. So I think people were very interested. AI has been around for many years, but not really in front and center. And so people in our company were very interested about it and felt like they were doing something that was cutting edge and that different approach to solve a problem. And so I think they really latched onto that. And then we made sure from an education standpoint that they really understood the pros and cons. That just became the underpinning of everything we did moving forward.
I've seen circumstances and situations where the topic of AI gets brought up early on, and it's kind of like a hallowed ground where just a few people know something about it. And it's amazing what they're doing, and it's so remarkable and so exciting. And the rest of the crowd's just standing around going, okay, you say, how do you get people to actually take the time without feeling threatened to take the time to learn just a little bit about what it really is? Because on one hand, it's always there. Like you've said before, back in the day when you're doing shopping on Amazon, it's using AI, but people don't think of it like that. And now all of a sudden AI emerges as this new powerful technology. And maybe in the future, it just becomes so-so again, like we don't care. But the question for you is, how do you get people inside your company to start to embrace it? Was that a hard thing to do? Is everybody on board with it now? Or are there still some stragglers?
No, I think you'll always have some stragglers that are a little skeptic of things, but I think when we like in our hire, like we're bringing on new employees, part of the reason they gravitate to our company, if you look us up on our website, is we speak to the point that we're an AI driven company. And I think the individuals that come and want to work with us want to work with AI. I think you brought up an interesting point on people sometimes they're scared of it because they don't understand it. And AI historically has been this black box. In 2023, when Chat GPT came onto the scene, it was just an explosion of just what it could do and news cycles. And there's a bunch of PE and VC money going into all of these startups. But what was very interesting with that is, unlike predictive AI that's working in the background, like you could just log on to the internet and open up Chat GPT. You didn't even have to pay for it and start using it. So it was very tangible. And my mom could get on there and ask for, these are the things that are in my pantry. Can you give me a recipe for dinner? And so it's very tangible. And I think that how tangible it was, and how you just type in a question in plain English and get a result, I think that really opened people's eyes to the art of the possible. And I think that's why we see where people really recognize the opportunity to make their day better. And you mentioned skeptics. So on the flip of that, though, this it being much more prevalent, I do think there are people that are afraid that AI is going to take their jobs. We've seen in the news, I believe it was Kaiser, the nurses at Kaiser, there was a lot of press around their concerns that you can't replace the human piece of and the skill set of nurses with AI, and the pushback there. So we are a lot of excitement, a lot of people see what it can do, but still the kind of being very cautious.
Yeah, there's a lot of fear. There's a fear of missing out. That's for sure.
Mhm.
If I don't get involved with this, I'm going to get left behind. And then there's a fear of being overtaken as well. I think you overcome all these fearful circumstances with education. I know, Heather, personally, I didn't want to get left behind. So I signed up. I was a little bit scared to do it. I signed up for a program at MIT, and it was basically AI in healthcare. And I was joined with 150 other people from around the world. It was all online, so it wasn't in person. But I was going to be really intimidated because I thought, boy, these guys, it's MIT and they're super smart, and I'm just an average guy. But everybody on that course was in the same circumstance as me. They were curious, they wanted to learn more, they were far from being expert, but they weren't going to get left behind. So I was just trying to imagine what it'd be like at Xsolis as you guys transform, because as I go through your material and learn more about you, you guys are heavyweights. This isn't something that's, oh, by the way, we're tinkering in it. You guys are really leaning hard into it. The next question I've got, not so much inside, but your customers, they include both payers and providers.
Yeah.
And typically, the world of healthcare, I don't
Mhm.
think we fall in that category of early adopters. We're pretty
Mhm.
slow to change. Have you seen a change in mind or willingness in recent times with your clients to start to listen and engage more in the topic of world AI utilization?
Oh, 100%. We do business reviews with our clients and walk through their metrics and obviously the return on the investment that our clients made. And the very first question that came up on the call before we even got into the business review was, are you guys doing anything new in generative AI? Are you looking to use agentic AI? And if so, can we sign up to be a beta? Like, that's the level that hospitals are in healthcare, particularly the very forward-thinking one, is as a company, from a mission standpoint, like, we're trying to get rid of friction in healthcare, and a lot of that friction is administrative waste. There's all kinds of numbers that are out there of how many trillions of dollars are being wasted in healthcare, and that is where hospitals really see the efficiency win and revenue capture through AI. And so we almost don't even have to sell it anymore to some degree, because hospitals have such, their margins are really narrow. There's a lot of pressures on them, even more so since COVID. And they recognize that they can't throw more people at the problem because there's staffing shortages. And this is really front and center of a way to solve those problems.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. When you said there's inefficiencies and waste and fraud of a $4 trillion industry, 25%, almost 25%, $1 trillion worth is just unaccounted for, unacceptable, inefficient waste. And you can't hide from that. It's obvious, but no one's willing to take on the issue and say, I'm going to solve that problem holistically. And I guess you have to start somewhere with some of the simpler, low hanging fruit, some of the fundamental things. It doesn't have to be superhuman, so to speak. But
Right.
I think there's a case for some superhuman type things. You published a lot of articles, and I know recently I read one of your articles you had out there in Forbes, and it was related to the human side of AI
Mhm.
adoption. And I think you touched on some of the issues of trust and transparency, some of the success and failures. Kind of share with our audience a little bit more on that topic of the human side of AI. What's that involved?
Yeah, I think one piece of it is around that change management, right? If you're bringing on a new product, whether it has AI or not, and I think adding in AI again, because you do have people that are concerned, it's here's this new tool that's going to take my job. That change management piece is really around like a human's response to change. So often you're dealing with emotions. You're dealing with, I like things done this way. And now you're trying to get me to hear that adage, move my cheese. And so that's a lot of times at the crux of the problem. I think also when you're either if you're coming in from the healthcare provider side, they're really looking right now. AI is fuzzy, so they're like, "Oh, we need AI, we need AI." But what you really have to think about is even before the tech piece is, what's the problem I'm trying to solve? Because if you don't have a problem to solve, then like, why are you bringing this stuff in? Because then you're going to just frustrate people. So one of the things I talked about in that article was just sit down with if you're whatever department you're in, sit down with the folks that are doing the day to day work. Like, what frustrates them? What are the repetitive tasks that drive them nuts? Like, why do they have all these sticky notes around their monitor? So those tend to be the types of problems that AI can solve. And then that can be like, if it's something in, you mentioned Xsolis several times. So if it's something in utilization management or rev cycle, that's where you might reach out to a vendor like ourselves and figure out like, are they helping to solve that problem? And when you do that, that then helps you with the change management piece because
So
people are more receptive to rolling things out.
So you specialize in change management using AI in a way. I think
Mhm.
that's a safe statement. I remember you said "Who Moved My Cheese." I remember that book. I
Mm.
think it was Spencer Johnson wrote the book. I used it with my kids when they're growing up. I always had to negotiate with them and tell them
Mhm.
why this is happening or whatever. But change management is huge, especially in
Mhm.
an industry that doesn't want to change sometimes.
Yeah. I think that one of the things that we learned along the way, I think it's easy and it makes you feel better if you're doing an implementation and rolling something out. That you always have individuals that are like, they're excited. They're like, oh, this is something new and I'm going to learn it and I'm going to use it. And then you always have the naysayers, right? The ones that and so it's easy to gravitate to the folks that are excited and raise their hand and I'll try it first. But in reality, you want to make sure you include the person that's not as excited, that's being a bit more negative. Because if you can figure out how to get that individual on board and be a champion, like, you really won. And I think that was something we learned along the way was don't just gravitate towards the people that are easy to get to use your product or be part of that change.
I think we all experienced that with Epic and Cerner when we tried to
Mhm.
bring in the electronic health records, trying to get people to try something new, be an early adopter, take advantage of it. And now we've kind of layered on top of that whole platform another set of tools and capabilities. Another question I have here, the superhuman, we see sometimes things that are done with AI and we go, wow, that's amazing. That MIT course I told you about, they went through an example, a superhuman example. They had somebody cough 3 times, coughed once, coughed the second time, coughed the third time. And can you differentiate anything in those coughs? No, you can't, not with your human ear. But they built an AI model that could tell whether you had COVID, asymptomatic, or didn't have COVID. They had tens of millions of coughs they analyzed, and it was highly accurate. Wow, that is superhuman. Like, you couldn't do that in a normal environment. That's a super large language model that's doing some
Mhm.
amazing things. And the other day in the New York, and it was a Wall Street Journal, I saw an article where they've got a masseuse now, which is a robotic masseuse. And the reporter had got a massage from that, then got one from the regular masseuse, tried to compare the two. It's like, really? AI is getting involved now doing your body workouts? Wow, this is another exciting thing that's going on. So I can see where there's a lot of apprehension at times. But when you go into an organization and you're working with these large health systems, and they probably have an impression that AI can solve any problem. It's superhuman. But do you need a good environment first, or can AI actually fix a broken process? What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, that AI cannot fix a broken process.
Say that again.
And AI cannot fix a broken process.
How's that? No.
Yeah, that is probably front front and center. And actually, I've been on several calls with health systems, and fortunately, they actually recognize that you have to be thoughtful of what steps need to happen first, that in order to layer like a new process or AI on top of it. I do think, and we do actually get some of these questions as well. Part of what when you're rolling out a new AI tool into a healthcare system back in 2016, even 2018, I would get one question like, "How accurate is the model?" And that would be it. But now, and very much I agree in how the industry is moving, is now I get like 100 questions, and it has to do with the type of data that is used to train your model, a lot of security questions, fairness, when you think about responsible AI. And interesting, one of the questions that I have received is, do you really need AI to solve this problem? Could the problem be solved like with something that's a little more simple?
Uh,
And that you don't actually have to put as many like safeguards in place,
yeah.
which is actually a great question because you can end up over engineering things, which then adds additional costs when there may have been a much simpler solution. So that's an interesting point that you brought up.
That's kind of if you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Yep.
I want to drive it in with my hammer.
Yeah.
Use AI for everything like that.
Yeah. And tying into that, this is now almost like talking about classic rock, is predictive machine learning models or classic AI. We've now moved into generative AI, and now what's even becoming the buzzword is agentic
Right.
AI. And I have to remind people, you don't just gravitate towards the whatever's buzzy right now or hitting the news cycle. You have to go back to what problem are you trying to solve? Because the solution may be a predictive machine learning model. It may be generative AI. It may be, or maybe a combination. So I think of them as tools in my toolbox.
Okay. So, what's been your assessment, Heather, when it comes to these large accounts? Who's leading the AI strategy? Is anybody leading it? Is there anybody that's really paying more attention to the governance? Is it a CIO, a CMIO, chief operating officer? Who's leaning in on that?
Yeah. You will notice that there are more kind of chief AI officers. That role came out really in the last year or two, and they aren't necessarily highly technical people are. Some are, but some are maybe a bit more clinical facing, but have some experience with AI, either through their work or through education. But I think, and we really leaned into it this year. We're trying to figure who to align with. But I think it is critical that you come in from that responsible AI standpoint. And there are organizations out there that are really driving the charge because we've had maybe there's not good federal regulation in place at this time. The states are one's doing one thing, another's doing another thing. You'd mentioned the EMR, like back when the Epic, Cerner, Meditech, all of them were first starting. physicians didn't have a voice in it. We didn't know we even needed it. We didn't know what was coming out, I don't think. So now, and it's not just the physician, it's healthcare really needs to step up and be, they're the kind of lead the charge on what is responsible AI and what governance should be in place instead of waiting. Because if we wait, that's actually going to end up suppressing innovation instead of creating governance that aligns with innovation. So we joined CHI earlier this year, the Coalition of Health. One reason that we decided to join CHI was their ecosystem aligns with our ecosystem. Pretty prominent healthcare organizations, payers are also a part of it, vendors, and so it really does represent the key stakeholders of in the AI space and what's being rolled out. And so and I think it's important to have a voice at the table. Yes, yeah,
I like the name chai. It's my favorite tea drink.
I know. Yeah.
They've done a good job. Coalition for Healthcare AI. And I'm just starting to learn more on a previous podcast interview. And that's one of the fun things for me, Heather, is getting to talk to people like you and others. I learn every day more and more. But I just started learning about
Hmm.
model cards. And I think Chai has some type of model card registry they're starting to get in place. Are you familiar with that and what it does?
Yeah, so we've actually had model cards for many years on each of our predictive models, and Chai, part of their work is trying to standardize things because like our model card would look different than another model cards. It wouldn't look different. A lot of the things are the same, but differences. So they have put out a standard, and it's a very well done model card. They like to think of it as the nutrition label on a cereal box or something. Like, what do I need to know about this model from a performance standpoint, from a safety standpoint, use case standpoint? And then to your point, they are creating a registry so that if I'm a healthcare system and I'm looking at the companies and I want to get a better understanding of their I can go to Chai and look up and see if they have model cards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've seen similar type organizations start to emerge on quality standards for AI. And like you said, it's like a nutrition label. It really helps simplify the buying process, what you're getting. The vendor publishes and you subscribe. You find
Mhm.
out what it is. Will Mikey eat this? Is this good or bad? Does it satisfy your needs? Are you concerned about things? Does it have the good housekeeping seal of approval on it? I could see that being a useful application. I know they let small startups join as well. I'm looking into that as being a potential member there too. Heather, I want to recognize and promote the new podcast that you are hosting
Yeah.
now. I'm grateful that you're on our podcast today, but you've got a new podcast called AI Amplified. And I love the name. I think that just rocks. AI Amplified, because I think it tells the message of what you're trying to do. And you've got such a rich history of publishing, providing articles for Newsweek and Forbes, Information Week. You've got a big long list there. So I think this podcast for you is going to be a real rich environment to continue to learn and also share. So I just want to make sure our audience knows about that. We'll be glad to make reference to that in our footnotes for this podcast as well. So congratulations. Was that a hard thing to decide to do?
No, I think maybe if you asked me to do that 5 years ago, I probably would have had a slight panic attack. You want me to I've always been probably not the most talkative person. Like I to work through data and things like that. So I didn't we joked actually before getting on this call that I didn't really have that on my career bingo card, being a podcast, but I've been fortunate to be a guest on podcasts, yours and others, and I think it's just a great opportunity. And you mentioned this as well of to learn.
Yeah.
And I think it's so important in this space because it's changing so quickly to have conversations so that we collectively are able to make the best decisions and provide the best quality products or whatever you're trying to do to our clients and in healthcare at the end of the day to the patient. So I'm pretty excited just some of the guests that we have lined up and I'm a little bit of a geek at heart. I did research in DNA repair for a while before going to med school. So some of the guests, it's not different areas where AI is showing impact. not just what I do in a day-to-day kind of life. So I'm pretty excited about it.
The name Amplify says it all.
Yeah.
It's going to really focus in the areas where it's not well understood and people will better understand it. Doing two a month, that's great. I do one a month. Diana's my producer. And if I said two a month, I think she would leave. Okay. So it's a lot of work doing it right, et cetera, but it's got a lot of reward associated with it as well. So if you don't mind, can we talk about care level score? It's something you created and how it impacts the payer, the provider, and the patient. I thought that was a pretty novel approach, and I thought maybe you could share some insights of how that came about and what it does.
Yeah, so we work in primarily in utilization management and into mid revenue cycle. So a lot of what the utilization review nurse is doing is looking at clinical information in the electronic medical record and trying to make decisions around a patient status. And inpatient status equals higher billing, and OBS is like patients staying there shorter in the lower billing state. And it's been like historically a very manual process. And if you think about it, when a patient comes into the hospital, like they come through the ED and then they're there for multiple days, the amount of data points associated with that care, like all of the vital signs, labs, clinical documents. And so it was just next to impossible for them to keep up with those data points, not because they're doing a bad job, but because it's just, really hard. So things slip through the cracks, which equals revenue loss or increased risk of denial. So that's where we saw the opportunity is to get real-time data from the electronic medical record and then apply it into analytics to create what we call the care level score. So it is a pretty robust score that looks at all of the clinical data points associated with that case and then outputs a score between 0 and 157. If it's greater than 75, more likely inpatient, less than 75, more likely outpatient or observation. And it continues during the entire hospital stay. So somebody might be appropriate for OBS initially, but then there's a new data point or an MRI report, and now all of a sudden they're appropriate for inpatient. So the score has the ability to change and alert someone to take a second look. So I like to call it your personal assistant that's working 24/7 in the background
Yeah.
and telling you, prioritizing your day and making sure that you really address the cases that should be addressed, again, for revenue impact or might be a denial risk.
See, I would be welcoming that as a tool, as my sidekick.
Mhm.
Help me get through the day.
Yes.
So that would be good. Wrapping things up here, young students graduating now in healthcare administration. What advice would you give them today? Should they embrace this, run from it, or go in deeper? What are your thoughts? What advice would you give a young graduate today getting
Mhm.
ready to get into the real world in this healthcare administration world?
Yeah, from an AI standpoint, I would strongly suggest that they, whether it's take a course, you mentioned taking a course at MIT, but taking a course or through an internship, but I would make sure you are upskilled from an AI standpoint. You don't need to be data science level, obviously, but that you understand the pros and cons of it, and then because it's not going away, it is going to be a part of your day to day. To be honest, I'm a little jealous of the folks that are just now entering med school because of some of the things that I've seen that are really helping clinicians. And so, yeah, I'm definitely a little jealous because I would have loved to have had those tools. But I do think that in order to be successful and not be left behind, that AI education is critical.
Yes. I remember I got my engineering degree before the internet, so that's a
Yeah.
whole different story. And my advice to them is become either part of the steamroller or become part of the pavement.
Yep.
You get on top of this. But this is exciting times, Heather. This has been great to have you with us. Dr. Heather Bassett, Chief Medical Officer of Xsolis. Thanks for sharing your insights, and we look forward to following you in your new podcast, AI Amplify. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. Really enjoyed the conversation today, and thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening today. If you have any questions or want to hear from a specific guest, contact us at gopi.com. That's GOPI, gopi.com. Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcasting app to make sure you don't miss any of our episodes.